Good morning. Welcome to Future Ready Visionaries for New Tomorrows. My name is Navjeet Kandola and I am very excited today because we're going to talk about our feelings and our emotions and how they impact our lives and in fact how they can influence our futures in terms of how we relate to ourselves, our families, our communities. We don't oftentimes think of our emotions being able to have that kind of an impact on our lives, and yet every day we feel and we communicate through an emotional awareness. So our guest today is Dr. Deborah Ooten, who's going to help us navigate and move through this conversation so that we can begin to understand how we can use the power of emotions, whether there's a way to develop or allow an evolution of our emotional self, and how we can use that to create prosperous, positive futures, not only for ourselves, but humanity as a whole. I think that when we look at this summit, the purpose is not just for me a positive future, but a positive, prosperous future for all. Dr. Deborah Ooten, our guest today, is a PhD and is the founder and director of Conscious Living Center. She has a doctorate in clinical psychology, is an occupational therapist, a trained cranial sacral therapist, and a certified Enneagram teacher in the narrative tradition. She is certified by Dr. Don Beck in spiral dynamics. We're going to talk about all of those things and how they influence our emotions and how to even see what the emotions and the personality is. So it's going to be fantastic. She's a founder and CEO of Conscious Dynamics, bold companies created one person at a time. Welcome, Dr. Deborah Ooten. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Yes, so let's just dive right into this conversation and talk about what is your understanding of feelings and emotional intelligence. What is that?
Well, for me, feelings are immediate. They're present moment oriented. They're not the past or the future. So a feeling is right here, right now. Joy, sadness, sorrow, it could be anything that we're having. An emotion for me has a tendency to be based on the past or the future. So we'll say a feeling that's colored by something from the past or an anticipation of the future. And so the emotions have a tendency to be not live. I call them memorex. It's sort of like a memory rather than a true experience of the present moment.
Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic distinction, so that people can really begin to have a sense of what they're feeling now, and that the now can be influenced by what you felt in the past.
Right. It can be, the now can become a story or an extension of a story that we already have going on. Mm-hmm. And so the key here would be to try to live present moment, of course, instead of adding the story or the fear of the future, mm-hmm. or the anticipation of what's next.
Is there a way we can is there an intelligence to feelings, would you say? Because we're talking about emotional intelligence. How would you describe emotional intelligence?
When we look at emotional intelligence, we're basically looking at, from my way of looking at it, we're looking at stuff from Daniel Goleman's work. And he defines there are 5 specific kind of characteristics of individuals who have emotional intelligence. And I also say emotional and social intelligence. So it's self-awareness. So that's basically the ability to, recognize and understand your own emotions, your moods, and also your drives. What are your values? What drives you? It also helps you to understand how that sense of who you are, those emotions and those drives affect other people that you come into contact with. So self-awareness is a key aspect of emotional intelligence. Also self-regulation. So, you think about children and, sometimes they get all excited and, kind of spastic in a way. Mm-hmm. Some of them can, regulate themselves and kind of calm themselves down. And we have many tools in our repertoire for calming ourselves down, meditating, walking, any of those things, breathing. That's a really good one. So self-regulation says that basically we as individuals know how to calm ourselves, to control or basically redirect any of those kind of destructive impulses or moods or emotions that might get us into a place of being non-compassionate, unkind in our interactions with others, if you will. Mm-hmm. Another one is the characteristic that Daniel describes as motivation. It's basically a passion to work that's about and beyond just work itself. It's not for money. It's just to be constantly in the motion of creating something for us, for the universe. It's about establishing goals and being persistent in whatever we pursue. I think the one of my favorite of the characteristics of someone with emotional intelligence is empathy. Mm. And empathy basically, is the ability to understand the emotional makeup of others and of yourself. And then to not be in a place of judgment, to be able to hold whatever is present. A lot of times what we see in the world is paradoxical. Mm-hmm. So we're able to hold that, hold both and, I say. It's not a but, it's an and. Mm-hmm. And so when we hold that, we can have room for all things to exist in the way that they're existing in the moment. And then I think finally the third one is social skill, or the fifth one rather is social skill. And social skill talks about our ability to build networks and communities and to utilize our resources and in our cultures. So cultures can be our family, our workplace, our city, our state, our country, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I think those are important pieces that we have that define emotional intelligence, according to Goldman.
Right. Yeah. What happens when somebody has bits of that emotional intelligence missing? Say you didn't learn self-regulation, or motivation isn't happening, or empathy is a little bit broken or cracked. How can we begin to, because in the work that I do, or just in life generally, I don't think I've met anyone that's so complete in themselves. There's fragments or pieces that are cracked or broken or missing. And so is there a way for us as humans to find that wholeness?
That's a really good question. It has to do, of course, with the evolution of humanity in one respect. And so, how do we find our wholeness? I think we find our wholeness by being present to ourselves, present to others. There's a number of ways to do it. You can get involved in, one of my favorite tools is the Enneagram. Mm-hmm. So if you use the Enneagram to understand, what motivates your way of thinking, feeling, and behaving, you can begin to sense some of the things that you do habitually. Mm-hmm. And so when we recognize those habits that we have, we can begin to go, is this something I really want to do? Or do I have a way of choosing something that's a little bit more conscious? I think when we look at how to grow those pieces that may be missing, like the empathy or the social skills, I think we just need to look at ourselves through the lens of self-awareness and see where could we increase how could we increase? Why do we want to increase our own conscious evolution? I think you're right. I think we all have aspects of ourselves. I call them the separate I's, like the I that's Dr. Deborah, or the I that's an owner of my dog, or the I that's a teacher. Any of those different I's have different components, and they can be, as you say, broken. Broken's hard for me sometimes. I like to see it as more from health and wholeness. So I like it to be, this is an area that we could focus our attention on a little bit, if you will. Yeah.
I like that distinction there. And also, I think that with, do we want to become these perfect humans where everything is perfectly working and orchestrating? Or is there a place where we can accept ourselves? And I was liking the way you were moving with that conversation. in that we ask the question, is there something more that I would like? Is this working for me? Not necessarily to reach perfection, but to seek and inquire. Because I think just where we start in terms of how we see ourselves already states whether we see ourselves as something wrong or broken, as I said, or something, that's not whole, but we are whole, but we can choose to move towards growth. How would you describe that?
Right. I think there's two paths that I think of when I think of growing. I think of growing our psychological self.
Yeah.
So that's our egoic self. I don't think we're ever finished with that. I mean, I think that, that could take lifetimes, actually. Many, many, many lifetimes. And then I think we grow our soul self, or our essence self. From the essence perspective, I think we're already whole. I don't think there's anything broken. I don't think there's anything wrong. I have a strong belief in, our divinity as beings. I think somehow we forgot that we were whole. Mm-hmm. And there's a purpose to that. I think there's a purpose in the universe. The reason we forget that we're whole is so that we can contribute to the universal evolution by falling asleep in our day-to-day work and then waking back up, falling asleep, waking back up. And I think that gives energy to the universe and to its evolution. So if we're looking at our own spiritual path, I think we can work hard to evolve that by taking a course, and I don't mean a study, but by taking a practice, whether it's, Buddhist practice, any kind of practice that you want to take. Mine is the Enneagram and spiral dynamics, and continuing to look at them and seeing where and how I can challenge myself to evolve to the next level of awakeness. Psychologically, I think we just have to track our patterns. And again, the Enneagram for me, perfect for tracking patterns. Why do I think, feel, and behave these ways? And generally, when I boil them down, they're like 5 each. I have 5 real feelings, 5 real thoughts, and 5 real behaviors that are pretty consistent.
Great. And then talk a little bit about what you started talking about, the Enneagram as a way of identifying or using that as a way of practice to distinguish and learn about yourself. And then the other style that you talked about is spiral dynamics. Could you tell us a little bit about what those two things? I was reading about them on your website. Very fascinating, the cross-referencing that they do and create kind of a more of a hologram.
Exactly. Yeah, when you look at the Enneagram, I think I think of it as basically the evolution of the individual. When I think of spiral dynamics, I think it's talking about and helping us to understand the evolution of humanity. So the phylum, the species. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the Enneagram helps us to identify and track those patterns, those habits that we as human beings get into. You get up every morning, you brush your teeth, you go to the bathroom, you brush your teeth, you walk your dog, you get your coffee, whatever it is, all in the same order. And, it's something we do. It's kind of funny how we, order our lives. When we look at spiral dynamics, though, on the other hand, it's showing us basically the evolution of the biopsychosocial evolution of human consciousness. And we're talking about adult human consciousness here in this system. Mm-hmm. It basically says it's a transcend and include model that says, you start out and basically as a survivalist, with just our basic needs trying to be met. And then as we evolve, I like it to look at it like it goes out like this. And so as we evolve, we're able to more readily hold the space for a greater container. We have a greater container for holding what's out there in the universe. We can look at something and go, oh, I may not understand that, but I can accept it and allow for it to be.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that with both Enneagram and spiral dynamics, that you can track cultures, nations, and see the evolution or the movement of different cultures and nations, and why we may be having certain conflicts between
Absolutely.
different kind of that tribe mentality?
Absolutely. We can track. I think the Enneagram helps us to, again, look at that psychological evolution. I think spiral dynamics helps us to look at a number of different aspects of our evolution, most specifically our cultural, as you say, our tribes. And you can see how things change when you look at nations. You can see how we grow or how we don't grow, how we grow to a place where at some point we have to contract in order to protect ourselves. I think of the Netherlands when I think of that. So it's they're both really good systems for knowing itself, but it's not just about like the egghead kind of aspect of knowing, which I can really get into, but it's about knowing on a deeper level. It's about being able to utilize the systems to take a deeper dive inside of you and to hold the space, compassionately, lovingly, with empathy for other people and what they're going through. So I think they're both great systems.
I want to talk a little bit about the tension that we can feel between our higher self and what we know, spiritually, evolutionary. We have a sense of our wholeness, divinity, cosmic awareness, and the reality of I'm stuck in some patterns still. How can we navigate that? And that could be as a nation, it could be as a community. How do we deal with that tension between higher knowing, higher wisdom, and where we may be kind of moving and living from?
I love that concept. What I say about that is we as human beings go about trying to figure out how to fix. We're problem solvers. That's what we do. That's what we do best. And how to fix what? Well, it's how to fix what we perceive to be broken. And what we perceive to be broken is colored by our habits, our culture, our values. And so for me, I approach every day, every second, with the question in my mind, how is this not broken? So like if my car breaks down, I'm leaving Asheville after this and driving back to Cincinnati to see actually somebody from your area, Richard Rohr, and he's in Albuquerque. And what if my car breaks down on the way? Is that a problem? Is it broken? Is there something wrong? Did I do something that I shouldn't have done? Those kinds of things. I don't see those as being true. I see it as in divine order. I see it as being in alignment with whatever is. So maybe my car breaks down in Knoxville. Well, perhaps the breakdown saves me from being in a car accident 15 minutes down the road. So I always see everything as happening in divine order. So does that make sense?
Yes,
so
yes.
The higher self, I know that we get into this, like you said, this tension, but I think that's the human dilemma. Unfortunately, we think that we have to fix something, and nothing's broken. Yeah,
let's go a little bit deeper into that, because I want to kind of get the feeling of what we're saying. We'll really massage this, which is so let's go into a conversation of, say, somebody's having a disagreement with another person, and there's conflict there. Or it could be Obama and Putin, and they're not agreeing. So what would be your approach? Would your approach be to, let's not look at what's not working, let's look at this as a potential for growth? How do you do that? Because sometimes there's genuine heartache and struggle, and you keep finding yourself there. Even though you might say, okay, well, there's a higher good, but the heartache or the breakdown that's happening is phenomenal. So how do we sit with that? Dr. Deborah Ooten, tell us.
Very hard to sit with.
Yeah.
We all have judgments. Very hard to sit with. Here's kind of the way I look at it. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. So suffering is optional. It's how is it that, and I get that there's suffering all over the world, and and in each and every one of us, and I get that there's pain all over the world, but how do I know that it's Obama's right? Let's just go with that one. How do I know that it's Obama's right to tell Putin what to do? How do I know that his way of thinking about what's happening there is in the best interest of the people in Russia? How do I know? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I might believe that my values are better, more solid than someone else's, but I don't. But I think that's just us putting our lens on something. I think this is how we get a little bad rap around the world, actually, because we think we know what's best for whomever. We meaning an individual or a culture.
So, what would you recommend to Obama or Putin in this example to move forward? I mean, because looking through some lens, we can just say, whatever happens, we can look at it and see the gift of it. Like you were saying, it's a divine order. See the gift of this. And yet, sometimes we have to make a move, which may or may not be positive, but how do we know is there a system of discernment that we can use to say, okay, I've done the best that I can? Is there a system for that you could use, Obama could use, Putin could use, I could use in my daily life?
Well, I think, again, working with the emotional, intelligence, it's like coming back to that. What am I aware of in myself? Mm-hmm. What am I motivated for? Mm-hmm. How can I regulate my own, destructive tendencies?
Right.
What is destruction? Those are the questions that I have sometimes. It's like, how can I have empathy for what's going on here and there? Mm-hmm. I can tell you I don't know enough about the Obama and Putin dilemma because I don't watch TV. I don't read the news. I just get snippets of it here and there, but I can't advise that. But what I can say for us is really know ourselves and know that any kind of reactivity that we're having about another, whether it's another culture, it's not arising out there, it's arising inside of us. Mm-hmm. And that's the system I use. When I have a reaction, if I have a reaction to something you're saying or a way that you're being, I know it's all about me. I know it's coming from inside of me. It's coming from my values, my preference, my contraction, my egoic self that is cooperating with the higher self. I'm not saying that you're not going to have suffering or pain. I'm just saying that we're usually generating it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about some of the higher levels of emotional intelligence. Does it take because we all know some of the lower levels, survival, me, my stuff only, me before anybody else, making sure that I'm safe. What are some of the higher levels or the more evolved, I'm just saying higher, that's the language that we have, or the more evolved. Right. What's the upper register of emotional intelligence, would you say?
So I think we're really talking about the upper register of consciousness or our evolved consciousness.
Right.
And that upper level for me, very few people have reached, and it's and no cultures have reached that. And so that upper level basically has us having the ability to have a very holistic, colonic view. It's integral. Mm-hmm. It says that all of these parts are working together. The emotions are there, but they're used in service to the brain, basically, to the logic. There's an awareness that holds the space for all and everything. So there's an awareness that says, oh, wow, I don't really like what's happening, in this part of the world, but I see that they need to go through this to get to where they're going. Mm-hmm. They need to have, the square, like in Cairo, shut down in order to get where they're going, to create change. That's the way it's occurring right now. And as we evolve with more and more technology, it makes it, those things happen more, with greater urgency and greater quickness. And and it's more visible for all of us. So I don't know, the best thing I can say is that from that higher level, there's no real judgment. There's an understanding. There's, okay, my value may not be the same as yours, but I can allow yours to be. In what you're calling the lower levels of consciousness, I'm kind of fixated. My values are the best.
Right. Right.
Mine are right. Yours are wrong. There's more of a certainty, and there's nothing certain really, but there's more of a certainty in those lower levels. It's like, this is the way it is, and you're wrong. And in those lower levels, that's what allows us to kill each other, to have the isms that we have, in the world, racism, sexism, you name it, culturism, we have it. And so for me, we want to work to expand that consciousness to allow for a larger tent, a larger bubble, where there is no real judgment around it. Now, certainly there's discernment. Sometimes atrocities are happening, like you spoke about a bit ago, that require us to take an action. I think it's vital that we take action from a centered place, a clear place, a place where we've regulated. We're not going in and acting out of reactivity, but we've really thought through and have an alignment between our body, our mind, and our heart, centers of intelligence, and they're all saying, yes, this is the way to go. Let's take an action. Let's make an intervention.
Do you think there's a way to exercise our consciousness so that we build the musculature that can support the living of, the embodiment of higher consciousness?
Well, I think any practice, whatever the practice is essential for building and challenging ourselves to expand our consciousness. If we could just simply approach every day with the statement, I don't know, then we have loosened our certainty so that we can say, well, I don't really know what the answer is here. I don't really know who's right. I don't really know. I don't really know how the day's going to unfold. I may have it, planned, and something else happens. And so how do I flow with that higher consciousness, that universal order that is so much more intelligent than I am? And, the best way for me to do it is to flow with it, just get in the river and ride it. I know for myself when I suffer, it's when I resist what's showing up. And I can resist showing up.
I think we can all identify with the resistance.
Exactly.
We all have our know for sure aspects of our personalities or behaviors.
Right,
you push that, and you're just going to get a huge push back.
Absolutely.
From me, you don't. There are holy altars.
Right, exactly.
Oh, you just
don't mess with that.
Don't mess with that one.
Right.
And so, and even our holy altars are up to be challenged, right?
Absolutely.
Because
Most
really,
importantly,
truth changes through experience, and if we keep expanding in the way that you're talking about, then what was this truth today, because we're open, can be this truth tomorrow.
Absolutely. I love that. That's great. It's like, there is one truth, and that's that divine word that we're talking about, which means it holds all truths.
Yes.
Whatever we think of as a truth. And it's constantly evolving. Nothing stays the same. I am not the same me that began the conversation with you.
Yes.
I've evolved just in our interaction, in our connection, even though it's, we're not touching one another. We're in a communion with one another. I've evolved since the beginning.
Yes.
So it's not the same.
Yes. What future would you like to belong to? What would be just heavenly, blissful? Like, yes, this is how I would want it. Could you describe that for us?
Yeah, for me, and I don't see this happening in my lifetime, but
okay.
Um, um, well, it would be much like the community that I've built. It's a community that is whole. We're connected. We understand the connection. We're loving. We're compassionate. We're kind. We're empathetic. We may not understand you at any given moment and the insanity that is happening over there in that other person, but we reserve the judgment. We allow for it. One of the things that I would really love to see is us slowing down and us getting more in touch with nature and our humanity with nature and how that impacts us. I was sitting here waiting for our call, and I was watching this teeny tiny little bluebird. I mean, totally royal blue I've never seen. And it just made me happy. It was just happy. So I would like to see us do that. I think that if we could hold the space for... If we could hold the paradox is the best way for me to say it. There's not an either or. There's a both and. And and I think even when we look at some of the ancient symbols, the circle, which is the Enneagram, it says all and everything. We see the symbol, the yin and the yang. It's basically telling us that it's both and. It's saying there is no other. There's no other. And the minute we separate ourselves from the other, that's when we can do the damage. And if we could really hold that kind of paradox loosely and know that we're all here together. If I suffer, you suffer. That's what I would love to see for the future. It would be a place that is just filled with our ability to hold the space so that we can all do the deep work that we need to do in order to change our levels of consciousness.
So imagine that's happening. That's happening. It's a given, it's happening. We have the empathy, we have these communities. What's exciting you in this life then? Imagine that, we don't have to think about those things anymore. They're happening. It's boom, it's done.
Yeah.
What is exciting you? Because part of what I want to do is begin to create visions and ideas and seeds that say, okay, first, part of us just trying to get there, to have this experience of community, of connection and empathy and relatedness. And we've been working very hard, I would say, as humans over the last, this current civilization's effort worth. So imagine that we arrive here, and it's been a good few days. Actually, it's been a few years now, and it's not going to be taken away. So what is exciting us? What seeds would you like to seed in this future potential? And we'd have to say whether it's in this lifetime or another lifetime, but when it happens, what would you like to see happening? What excites you? What would excite you to be engaging in this world? Are you an artist? Are you painting? Are you, enmeshing with technology? What does your life look like?
Well, that's a future for me. Let's see. First and foremost, I don't see myself doing anything other than what I do, which is bringing consciousness to every human being that I come into contact with. So for me, it would be a space of, resting in a space of love, holding, of receptivity. I would be listening to understand rather than listening to respond. I would see all of us doing that, not listening just to get to the next thing, but really listening deeply to one another, to the universe, to the nature around us, just being really present.
I love that. That, listening to understand.
Yes.
And what does that create? Because you're going somewhere, and I love it. So what does that listening to understand? What is that activating? What is that experience?
For me, it allows that you and me, that separation that seems to exist, to disappear. And so for me, the communion, the connectivity, becomes just deeper, and there's no way that I can move in my mind, in my body, in my heart, without taking you into consideration.
I love that. I love that. That is awesome. That is such a powerful way. You communicated that so brilliantly, and it brought us right into the experience that you're talking about.
Right.
And that sense of communion, and it's so great because, I'm talking about the future as if it's outside, and you're talking about a future that is inside of us, and it's a different kind. It's not separate, but it's a different way to get to an experience of a future.
No, exactly. It's both in the same. For me, the future is existing right now.
Yeah.
We're languaging the future in discussion, right? Yeah. And so the past, the future exist in this present moment. We know for a fact that time is not linear.
Right.
So right now we're creating that inner and outer experience. So my experience inside also creates the experience that you're talking about outside.
Right.
Because, like you said, they're not separate.
Right.
They're one and the same.
So what is there an evolution of that listening inside? And I think you gave us a little clue when you said you want to things to slow down. Let's talk about what do we mean about slowing down.
So we can slow down internally. We can turn off our cell phones. We can have specific times to look at our computers, because we're all connected. And I'm thankful for that, for my friends all around the world and my ability to connect. But I think we also have to not always be connected to the technology. I think we have to slow down and be connected to ourselves, and to nature, to what is happening around us, so that we're aware, and interacting with it, and being present to it, it being nature. So what else? How else do we slow down? I don't know. I think, for me, I like, it's a kind of a dichotomy. I love the connectedness with my friends all around the world, and I love my local communities. I love participating in those local communities, being present, being aware of how I eat, what I eat, from where am I eating it, those kinds of things. So I think when you slow down to cook for yourself, to garden, to find the food that is really good for you, it takes time. It takes a lot of practice and connectedness to yourself and to those around you in your communities. So those are important, I think, ways to slow down as well.
I think from what I'm sensing when we're talking about slowing down is that when I slow down, or take time to go and connect to myself, is that I encounter vastness.
Oh, yes.
And when I'm in nature, I encounter vastness. And so a part of me, my identity, dissolves.
Yes.
And I think that's why people love to go out into nature, is because they don't have to carry this very small, narrow expression of themselves. They can slowly, it doesn't matter whether you've got your hair is done or what your face looks like or what you're wearing. Nature doesn't give two hoots about that.
Exactly.
And it's the same thing, I think, that when we slow down and we encounter ourselves, yes, initially on the surface, there are the judgments and so on and so forth. But if we continue to kind of let ourselves kind of go deeper and settle into that pulse, then it's incredible.
I love that.
There's an incredible self that's just all powerful, and not because it's powerful over others, but there's a sense of the source.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that's what happens when we go out and we become slow down in nature, or when we go in and we slow down. Right. And that source, again, is that experience of the whole, that we're not separate.
Yeah, it's resting, for me, it's resting in the ground of being.
Right.
Which is that vastness. It's the vessel that's empty. And because it's empty, then you're not coming to the moment with anything fixed or certain. You're coming with this openness. I like the word vastness that you use. I like that word a lot. So it's exactly coming to the place of resting in the ground of being, and that self, that egoic self, has a tendency to dissolve.
Yeah, yeah. And that's that in-between phase between
Right.
letting go of your iPhone. I don't have an iPhone on me, I've got a candle. Putting down your iPhone, getting off Facebook. Is that, who am I going to be without these things? And we're tapped into it. And it's then that moment, or those moments of getting off the devices, disconnecting from the identity that we get flustered in.
Right.
But if we trust the process, if we do it often enough, we know there's going to be that turbulent phase.
Right.
But soon enough,
We
it's like
rest,
getting into a warm bath, or stepping out into a gorgeous sunset. It's this welcome home, and I really feel that experience, recognizing there's going to be that discomfort momentarily, and then
that discomfort most people experience as an anxiety.
Yes.
And then it can even get to a panic. But if you just keep breathing and rest into it, you're right. It changes, it softens, and it allows for a shifting inside of ourselves.
Oh,
yes.
I've definitely experienced it in myself. If I've been working and I'm getting my social media stuff on, and I'm Facebook, Twitter, this and this, and then my son comes home, and that time, that transition between this and him is this this very rocky terrain of me going, no, I just need to tick, 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 tick. And he's like, mama, wait, hold on. And it's this like, then I just have to say to myself, just stop. The world is not going to end if I don't get back to that comment or something.
Exactly.
I've
gotten to a place where, I have this really fast-paced life in Cincinnati. And so in November, I decided to rent a house in Asheville. I can tell you that the space that is created by just changing the routine allows for both spaces to be impacted. Yes. And those are external spaces, but let's face it, the space that's really being changed is inside.
Right.
And so there's a new way of being with what, like you say, what is or was unfamiliar. And it was uncomfortable at first to just kind of hang out and, read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Breathe.
Encounter yourself, yeah.
Yes. And then it became a place of, wow, this is beautiful. This is the way I want to move through life. Yeah.
Right. In just last few moments, anything you want to transmit, because I love the idea of discussing and kind of having a conversation about these ideas. Is there an embodiment, an energy, expression that you would love to just radiate out, like you said, in the listening, going to understand? Is there something that you would like to share with us as a transmission with our listeners and viewers?
When we look at the future, the present, the past, all rolled into this one moment, I think, the most important piece for me, and as you call it, a transmission, is that we really approach each and every human being, animal, with, our heart fully open, our mind open, like we approach each other like new eyes, new ears, fully in love. And that place of listening to understand, not listening to respond. If we can really do that, and I believe it requires us to have our three centers of intelligence, the body, the mind, and the heart, in full alignment with one another, not relying on one over the other. We really have to synchronize our being. And in doing that, then meet the person, from a place of receptivity. Listening just to understand. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a beautiful transmission. I loved it. It really brought it home, the three centers. Yeah. Thank you so much for this fantastic conversation and education and transmission, Deborah. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Oh, it's been
Very
so
lovely.
fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.